Big addition.
What's up, you guys? TechChucker here, and I've got a review for you of the Mezco Toyz 112 Collective Popeye. Now, this was my absolute must-have for 2018. I'm so glad that they made this thing. Just look at all the accessories that it comes with. The box is really cool, but we're not going to waste any more time on this box. Let's go ahead and crack this thing open and take a closer look. In terms of articulation, I think Mezco did a really nice job on this. It's not perfect by any means, but it is still really, really good. And let's just jump right on into it. His head is on a double ball peg, and he can look up about this far, which is, you know, not too terrible. But then the neck also is on a ball peg, and that gets him a little bit more range of motion. He can look down about this far, and then you throw in the extra neck articulation as well, and you can get his chin pretty far down, which is pretty cool. He's got good side-to-side motion, nothing getting in the way of that. And then he has a really nice range of motion, both in the upper neck and the lower neck, which is really cool. He can kind of rotate that neck all over the place, which is great. Moving into the shoulders, he's got a ball hinge in the shoulder, and he can get his arm up about that far. You're not really going to have any issues with the cloth because it is fairly loose, so I don't think you're going to have to worry much about that. I don't believe there is an upper bicep swivel, but it does swivel at the elbow, so you still have that rotation. In the elbow, there is a single ball peg. There is a single hinge in the elbow, and that gets you almost 90 degrees. It would have been nice if it was a double joint, but I think because of the bulk of the arm, I don't know that that would have gotten us very much more anyway, so I probably can't complain about it. In the wrist, there is a ball hinge, and this hinge originally I thought was going to be too big and dumb looking, but I like that it is a much bigger ball hinge. It gives it a little bit more stability. It's, you know, you don't feel like you're going to break it. The range of motion forward is really good. Up is not near as good, but that is okay. I'm still pretty happy with it. Moving down into the torso, he's got what I believe to be a ball peg in the upper torso, and he can crunch forward about this far. He can arches back about that far. Not super great, but it's still pretty good. And then down at the waist, he has also another, I believe, ball peg, and he's got pretty good range of motion there. That's really nice. And when you add them all together, he can crunch forward about that far and arch back about that far, which is actually pretty darn good. He's also able to swivel at that waist, but it looks like there is something that stops it. So you're not going to get full 360, but I mean, you really don't need that anyway because it's not anatomically correct. Moving down into the hips, he can do about this much for the splits, and then you're starting to really, really get that crotch of his pants stretched out. So be careful with that. Don't push it. He can kick forward just about 90 degrees, a hair shy of 90, which is really good. And then he's able to kick back about this far. You know, it'd be nice if it was just a hair further, but you know, it works pretty good. There is an upper thigh swivel that works good, so you can kind of move the pants so that can swivel in there. And in the knees, he has pretty good range of motion. With his knees, he can go a little over 90 degrees. That's good. There's a boot cut right at the top of the boot, and then there is also what I believe to be a ball peg in the ankle. I'm not super impressed with the ankle articulation. He can really only get his foot back about that far, get his foot forward about that far, which is, you know, it's okay. And then he does have a little bit of ankle rocker. You kind of have to force it a little bit. You might want to heat that up just to make sure that you're not going to break that. But overall, the articulation, it's all there. It's really quite good, especially with the cloth. It works pretty good, so I'm pretty pleased with it. All right, so sculpt and paint-wise, Mezco did a really amazing job. I love what they did with this guy. Starting off with the face sculpt and the paint, just look at the detail work you can see on that face. I mean, there's just a ton of color and variation within that. You can see the blue in his eye as he's kind of winking the one. Now, if you're not familiar, Popeye is missing an eye as far as I remember it. And so that's why he's you know, kind of winking like that. But just look at all of the detail on this head sculpt. I mean, you've got different colorization. Hopefully you can see there's a little bit of paint detail on the skin to actually give it a real skin look, like there's little freckles on his forehead. Hopefully you can see those freckles on his forehead, the top of his head, and then in the face. There's just a ton of detail work that they did just with the head sculpt. And then you look at also the skin. They did a great job painting the skin. The tattoo actually looks like a tattoo, the way that they've kind of faded that look to look like those old sailor tattoos. They've got it on both sides. And then just the cloth itself, I'm super happy with the cloth. It's really, really soft and very, very thin. And that works really well with this. It sits very nicely, pretty much perfectly on his body. The only issue that I'm noticing is that the actual thread work or the stitch work up here in the collar is a little bit messy, but that's kind of to be expected because it's so small, but it's not really that noticeable. I love this piece that is actually, it's a little bit thicker felt, but it sits really nice. They've got this little plastic, it's not plastic, but it's another kind of faux leather piece that's ironed on that looks really, really good. The pants, the coloring of the pants are perfect. The stitching is great. I think they did an amazing job. And then they painted all the little eyelets on the shoes, and the laces are painted. There's some nice black wash in this. It just looks really, really cool. I just love the way that it looks. Even the fingernails have dirt and grime in those fingernails, which is super cool. It's a nice attention to detail. The one thing, we'll note one thing that I don't care for, is the hinge here is a different plastic. And while it might not be a different plastic, but it has no paint on it. And you can definitely see that difference. You see the speckling of the, I guess it's freckles and I don't know what kind of, maybe sunspots or something on there. And then there's nothing here and it's super smooth and it goes back to the hands. But that's not super noticeable, especially, when you're using that hinge. You're not going to notice it near as much. So I am still pretty pleased with this. I think they did an amazing job. You can see these little buttons. These are actually glued on, these little gold buttons. They're really cool. Even they kept the sculpt and paint going. I'm not going to take the shirt off. There's other videos that show his, like six-pack, but they've got the paint here and the sculpt in there, which is cool. There's a couple of buttons on the pants. So it's just chock full of detail. And I really appreciate that. I think Mezco knocked this one out of the park. I so hope that they are planning on doing other characters from the Popeye show. And as far as height goes, he is coming in at about 5 3/4 inches tall. So he's pretty short, but Popeye was a fairly short character anyway. So let's take a look and see how he compares to the Marvel Legends Deadpool. And Deadpool is about 6.5, almost 6 3/4 tall. I don't need it to scale, but I actually think that he scales really well with him. But let's go ahead and take a look at him next to the Mezco Deadpool. And for comparison's sake, I think, obviously this Deadpool is also much taller. But again, I don't really need him to scale, but he does. I think he scales really, really well with these 1/12 scale figures. Now, if you're still not convinced, accessories should put you over the top. Mezco gave us a huge, huge number of accessories. I mean, just look at all of these hands that we get with this figure. I mean, there's just a ton of them. You get 2 kind of open holding hands, you get 2 fist hands, you get 2 gripping hands, one specifically, this one, where the 2 fingers are kind of apart from the other 2. See if you can see that. And that just makes it a little bit easier to be able to hold some of the other pieces. And then this pointing finger, which is really, really cool. I love that pointing finger. And then we get 3 really, really cool hats as well. We get this sailor hat, with this other sailor hat, and then a nice, like, what's supposed to be a knit cap, which is really cool. The best part about these is these 2 hats actually have metal pieces in them, or maybe those are the magnets, and then there is a magnet or metal piece in the actual head. And so, oops, oh, that worked out well. So you can actually put these on at pretty much any angle that you want, and it will stay on his head, which is awesome. It's just a great attention to detail. Really love that. This knit cap stays on his head really, really well. It's fitted perfectly, basically, for his head. So that just sits on there really, really well. Love all 3 of these. The detail work on these, I'll get my hands out of the way so you can actually see. The stitching on especially this middle hat is just really cool. This one could have used a little bit of paint to get a little bit more of that stitching to just pop. But I mean, it's so cool having these magnets. You're not going to have to worry about having to just put the hat on in one angle and the one angle only. You can put it on in many different angles, which is really, really cool. And then we get 2 alternate heads, which basically these 2 heads are nearly identical, but there's a slight difference. You might be able to tell this one has a little bit of teeth showing and this one doesn't. Aside from that, they're essentially the exact same. So the only gripe that I have with that is, I guess I would have liked to have had another facial expression. Maybe one more, but I'm getting a little bit greedy because of all the accessories that we already got. But I did already check, and the head is the part that has the magnet. You can see my paper clip is sticking to the head. So you could, if you wanted to get any other piece or hat and throw a piece of metal in it, that'll also stick and hold on to his head really, really well. The detail work on these 2 faces is superb. I've noticed that the paint is a little bit lighter on this one than on this one, but you know, it's negligible at best. And next up, what would be a Popeye figure without his classic pipe? He's got 6 total, and I believe all of these 3, so these 3, let's move this out of the way so that you can hopefully see. Let's focus this up. So these have a little puff of smoke, and it's 2 puffs. I don't know if you're going to be able to see with that white background. Maybe we'll put something behind it so you can actually see. There we go. So it's got a little puff of smoke. We get 3 of these, and then we get 3 that do not have the puff of smoke. And I think, I may be wrong, see if I can get this out. I think that they did this for the sole reason of you're probably going to lose 1 or 2 because these things are absolutely tiny. But let's go ahead and show you how this works. Each of the heads have a tiny, tiny little hole in the mouth, and this just pops right in there. Be very, very careful. You don't need to put a lot of pressure on that to get it to go in. And there you have it. You've got Popeye smoking his pipe. You can either have it with the smoke or without the smoke. This is probably one of my favorite features. I just think it's super cool. You barely notice that little hole. So if you don't have him posed with a pipe, you're not really going to notice it, which is really cool. It's a great attention to detail. And the fact that they gave us 3 of each is also really cool. It just tells us that they know they're collectors. Sometimes you drop stuff and then you lose it. And the other part that I really like is they have this little plastic piece and a cover so that you can store them without worrying about losing them. So when you open yours, if you haven't already, do not discard either of these pieces. You'll need that to be able to store that so you don't lose them. And we're still going with more accessories. We also get a can of spinach. This is really, really cool. I love the paint work. I think they did a nice job on it. It says spinach there. There's a little bit of dry brushing on the bottom here. You can see it looks kind of grimy, and a little less grimy on the top, which is kind of a nice detail that they gave us to show, you know, what a real can would actually be like. It'd be a little bit dirtier on the bottom. But then we also get a crushed can with some of the spinach coming out. One thing that would have been cool is if we had had an effect where the spinach was actually shooting out, so that way then you could pose him eating and shooting it into his mouth. But, you know, again, this is really cool. It's painted really, really well. It is sculpted great. It actually fits perfectly into his hand. So if I can throw this into his hand, I mean, look at that. That's just a perfect fit. I think that works great. It actually has finger spots so that he can put that in. So it looks like he's crushed it. Great detail there. And then we also get this periscope, and there's a little clear piece of plastic here on the end to make it look like it's actually glass. There's also one here, and this is telescopic. I think that's the word. And the cool part is it does extend all 3 levels, which is really cool. And again, he can hold this in his hand really, really nicely. Just the attention to detail is so great with this. And then last but not least is this compass. There's actually printed on there the directions. There's a little bit of a dial on there, and it closes, which is cool. And again, he can hold this in his hand, which is really cool. I just, you know, the detail work on this is so nice. The paint is so good. There's actually an anchor that is engraved in there, that's sculpted in. So just so much really, really awesome detail that they gave us on this. And then we also get this duffel bag, and it feels like canvas, just to kind of emulate that canvas look. It's got a different kind of, I don't know even how to explain it, but this fabric is a really nice black kind of, I don't even know how to explain it. It's not felt, but it feels almost like felt. It's got Popeye written on the side, which is awesome. It actually has a drawstring. I tied mine so that I could have him hold it. And I also put a couple of cotton balls in here so that it feels like it's full. These are actual nice little, I think these are metal eyelets. And just, I mean, the detail is so good. They kind of dirtied it up a little bit so it looks like it's been used. Great stitch work right here and around here. I just, you know, they've got it dirty near the bottom, like it's been dragged on the ground a little bit. Just, again, the attention to detail is so amazing with this figure. Now, probably my favorite accessory for this figure is the pea coat. It's nicely detailed. You can see, maybe you can see, we'll move him a little bit. There is a pocket, and there are some nice buttons on here. And the cool thing is the collar has a wire, which is nice. And so does the, this part has bendy. I don't know if it's actually the Velcro that's making it bendy. Let's check this side. No, there's definitely a wire there. So they really did a nice job with this. The difficult part is getting it on him. So I'm going to show you how I do it. You can choose whether or not you want to use this method or not. I've found it's the quickest and least likely to rip some of the seams, because there's a lot of seams on this that could easily be torn. So first things first, I pull the head off. That way then it's just not getting in the way. And then we'll pull the hands off. We don't need those on. Now, you could certainly just put it on this way, but I have found pulling the arms off, the forearms off, makes this go so much faster and so much less pressure on all of the seams. You may want to heat this up. I've found I don't need to heat mine up, but just very carefully making sure you're holding on to the upper arm really nice and tight. Pop that off. I like to make sure that I keep the arm in the right spot. So I set this one over here, and then this one will go over to the other side. I don't think that it matters, but well, no, I think it does matter. So you want to make sure that you get the arms Yeah, you want to make sure you get the right arm to the right side, because otherwise your tattoo is going to be on the wrong side. This is also the way that you take this shirt off. Again, I'm not going to take that off. Go check out, I think Brock, he did a video on how to do that. But basically then you can just kind of pull the arm back a little bit and slide it into the sleeve. Make sure that this part goes inside the jacket, not outside, otherwise that would look dumb. And then slide this in like so, making sure that it goes up and over that shoulder. Be careful that you don't pull too hard, because you don't want to rip anything, because this is just such a cool accessory. You don't want to ruin this accessory. But you do have to give it a little bit of pressure, and you might have to adjust the arm a little bit so that that'll slide all the way. The hardest part is this flap on the back, this red piece. That gets in the way. But once it's on, you might have to pull this piece down so that the Velcro is fully showing, and then seal that shut. Now you don't obviously have to display him with his jacket closed. You can certainly have it open if you want. Now, this is the difficult part. Lining up the arm to get that arm back in. So slide that into the sleeve. Now this may seem, well, it's counterintuitive. Now I have to put the arm back on. Why not just slide it in, you know, with the arm, put the jacket on with the arms on? You can, but it takes a lot more because you have to get them all the way over these forearms. The forearms are huge, and it's just more likely to rip. So find that hole with the peg, give it a little pressure. You might have to twist just a little bit, being very careful. Once it pops, if you heard that pop, you know it's in. Go to the other side, do the same thing. Make sure that the cloth's not getting in the way. There, I don't think that one popped, but I'm pretty certain it is in. And now you can go ahead and put his head back on. Adjust things so you've got it the way you want it. Get the collar just right. Pull the jacket down a little bit. Put his hands back on. And voila. What a cool accessory. This thing looks amazing. This is my favorite accessory. It's just so cool looking. I love it a lot. And then last but not least is the figure stand. And this is the exact same stand we've seen from Mezco for ages now. There's not really a whole lot to talk about other than they've got a nice anchor design on there, which is cool. Again, you can either use this to have him stand directly on this, or pop it out and put the articulated arm in so that he can be displayed up in the air. I'm probably not going to use this at all for my Popeye, so I may use it somewhere else. And then you also have the nice Mylar bag for the accessories to throw in there, though this bag could very well be too small for all the accessories that this thing comes with. But overall, I have to say this is my absolute favorite figure of 2018. Could be one of my top 5 in my entire collection overall. This is just one of my favorite figures. It is so cool. Mezco really knocked it out of the park with this. I'm super excited, hoping that they will give us a Bluto, an Olive Oil, Wimpy, all of the other characters from Popeye. That would be amazing. I'm so excited to hear if they are going to actually give us that. I think they will, but I am crossing my fingers and hopeful. Alrighty folks, I hope you enjoyed this review. If you did, make sure you hit the like button, hit the subscribe button below. Make sure you leave a comment. Let me know what you think of this figure. Do you love it? Do you hate it? And until next time, I'll see you later.